Hello and welcome back to my channel, and welcome back to another episode of me having FOMO of booktube events and joining them a month late. And this time it's the Squash That Series edition. So Squash That Series is a readathon hosted by Bailey of Is Bailey Reading, and it's all about reading sequels or finishing up series, not so much starting new series. But clearing up those series you have on the go. Now, I'm not a big series reader. I read some occasionally, but there's only like a handful that I'm actually interested in continuing in. So series to me are not something I feel the need to squash. You know, the number of unread series on my TBR is not something that's really stressing me out. So this readathon is never something I really felt that I should do, but I do love Bailey's creativity when it comes to this series, this readathon. She hosts it kind of intermittently, you know, whenever it works for her. Also, sometimes it's just a weekend, sometimes it's a whole month, and then also the format changes every time. It's like a different kind of gameplay. So I've always really loved watching her announcement videos, and I always thought it looked like a lot of fun to join in with this readathon. So often I've been like, I wish I read more series so I could join in with the readathon. This time it's in a choose your own adventure kind of style, and when I saw the first half of like the starting of prompt video, I knew I wanted to join in. I'm not going to be reading only series. I'm gonna take the books on my TBR and I'm gonna just make it work. I'm guessing I'll be stretching the rules a little bit, but I'll make it work. In case you're not sure what a choose your own adventure readathon is, you should obviously check out Bailey's video, but I'll explain it to you as well. So there's a first prompt video, which is the same for everyone. Bailey in this video gives you a prompt for the first book you're picking for the readathon. When you learn the prompt, you then pause the video and read whatever book you've chosen for that prompt. Then you'll come back to the video and you'll be asked a question. It could be about the book, it could be about really anything else, but it will be a question with two possible answers, and if you pick answer A, you will click onto one video, and if you answer B, then you'll click onto the other video, and then that video will be your next prompt, and then that video will also end in another two choices. So everyone's path will be different. So yeah, I've already picked out my book for the first prompt. Already I had to cheat because the first prompt was to finish a series. Now I'm going to be counting the book I'm reading for TBR Spin in December, because it's the last book in the series of books I've read for TBR Spin throughout the year. So see what I did there? So the prompt for TBR Spin in December was to pick a book that intimidates you, which wasn't my favorite prompt, but okay. I ended up picking Winterberg's Last Journey by Jaroslav Rudis. This is a book I got from my Republic of Consciousness Prize subscription. I get a book from a different indie publisher from them each month, and this one, to be honest, it's not one I would have picked it up myself. It's pretty long, like 400 pages. The font is pretty small. Also, it's translated from the German, which kind of intimidates me for some reason. And just the cover gives me the impression of it being a bro book. You know, the kind of book where men will tell you that the train journey is actually a metaphor for blah 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 blah. And I know this might be unfair, but that's the vibe I'm getting. But I'll try and keep an open mind, and you know, I might be surprised. And then I'll be updating this video every week rather than, you know, after every time I finish a book, just because it's winter. There's no light when I'm home to film except for in the weekends. So yeah, I'll check back in a week and I'll tell you how it's going. So it's not been a week, it's been about 3 weeks, and I realize now I think I'm wearing the same sweater as in my last clip, but it's been 3 weeks and life happened, I guess. I finished 2 books, so let's talk about them. First up, I finished Winterberg's Last Journey, and this I actually ended up really enjoying. I wasn't sure I wouldn't be getting into this, but I needed to be worried. It is written by Jaroslav Rudis, who's a Czech author, but this is his first book published or written in German, and it's translated from the German to English by Kris. The publisher is Jantar Publishing, which is an indie publisher focusing on books from Central Europe. We have 2 main characters in this book. There is the 99-year-old Mr. Winterberg and then his nurse Jan Kaus. They are both men who now live in Germany but were born and exiled, I think, from Sudetenland and then the Czech Republic, respectively. At the beginning of the book, it looks like Mr. Winterberg is on his last days and Kraus is there to take care of him, but surprisingly Winterberg spruces up a little bit and he wants to make a train journey from Berlin, where he lives now, all the way to Sarajevo, because he says his true love died there and he wants to find out what happened. What you need to know about Winterberg is that he is obsessed with 2 things: history and trains. Also, they are taking a 1913 Baedeker for Austria-Hungary as their travel guide. So what this book basically is the 2 of them traveling through Central Europe by train. Winterberg is reading from his Baedeker and getting on these sort of long rambling tangents about history and trains and his father's cremation business, and his nurse is calling them historical fits because he literally just talks and talks and talks and talks and he can't seem to stop himself until he literally falls asleep. So you're like learning about the history of the region, you're learning about both of their personal histories and the way they mirror each other, even though they are a few generations apart, and yeah, just seeing all the places they stop along the way and the people they meet and the food they eat and all that. And I just had a really good time with this. It was surprisingly funny, but also kind of sweet and endearing. I almost would say that the characters were a bit quirky, but I feel that kind of does them a disservice, because I feel like even though especially Mr. Winterberg is written with some quirky traits, it's done very genuine and in a very loving and respectful way, and I think this book had a real good balance between humor and melancholy, in my opinion. It can be a little bit dense, a little bit long-winded and repetitive sometimes, but I had a good time with this book. Not to get too meta here, but I felt like this book took me on a journey and I like to be along for the ride. So that was that book. Then I went back to the video to see the question, which was, do you like this book more or less than the first book in the series? Now obviously this isn't part of a series, so I compared it to the first book I read for the TBR Spin this year, which was Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. I really enjoyed this, but the Claire Keegan I really loved. So I clicked on the I like this less video, and yeah, the next person I came to was Amanda of The Reading and Writing Life, and her prompt was to start a new series. And I could just see all the groaning and sighing in the comment section of that video, because, you know, obviously this readathon is meant to get a handle on your unfinished series, but obviously I didn't have that problem, and there were actually a few series I wanted to try, so I really liked this prompt, and I ended up picking this book. This is The Light Years by Elizabeth Jane Howard. This is the Dutch translation, and it's the first book in the Cazalet Chronicles. It's actually first published in the 1990s, but it seems like it's having a bit of a resurgence. I've seen it making the rounds on BookTube. This is an historical fiction book. At the start it is set in 1937 and we follow this, I guess, upper middle class family, the Castellets. The book starts in London, but we quickly move to this country estate called the home place. It's where the pater mater familias live, and during the summer their 3 sons come back home, all with their respective families. So basically you have this big country house with 3 generations of people, and then also the household staff that work there. This book, or the series, is often compared to Downton Abbey, and it's easy to see why. You have the big country estate, you have the family dynamics, the upstairs downstairs perspective, the historical context that plays a big role in the story. And I really enjoyed reading this, but now I finished it, I'm feeling a bit dissatisfied because it just really feels like the start of a series, like we are setting up for things, but nothing much happens in this book. In the story, pretty much everyone gets a voice, so every few pages or so the book will switch perspective. All the adults and all the children will get their own perspective. So this book felt more like an introduction to all the characters. And I will say, I loved the character writing in this. I mean, there is like over 20 of them, but they all do still very distinct and very fleshed out. But I think because the author spent so much time on the characters, the plot went kind of by the wayside. Like there's a few things happening in the book, a few plot threads kind of starting that never really go anywhere. And I see, you know, when you have so many characters who all have their own little problems and things going on, it's gonna be too much to follow through on everything. But there was a couple of times where a character would have something, you know, in my eyes at least, pretty significant going on, for it to then never be mentioned again, and it being like it never happened. So yeah, maybe those will be picked up in the rest of the series, but judging on this book alone, it really was more of an introduction or a setup to the rest of the series, and I like it more when a book in a series has also more of an arc on its own, rather than having it end at a point where you know the action is just about to start. In this case, that will be the start of the Second World War. And I guess it's also why I don't often read series, because I feel like if you spread out your plot arc over several books, it should have been one book. I mean, of course, you want like an overarching plot over a series, but I think each book individually also should have a beginning, a middle and an end, and it not being just a beginning and a start of a middle. So yeah, that's kind of why it left me unsatisfied, but I did enjoy it enough to want to continue with this series. I really liked diving into the family dynamics. I'm curious to see how the kids in this book will grow up, and I find it very interesting to see how they all reacted differently to the threat of war, and I really wonder how that will develop. Also, I loved all the descriptions of food and the clothes and everything. So yeah, I have a feeling I'll probably enjoy the series as a whole, but I can't judge that on this book alone. So let's put this out because it's pretty heavy. So then I went back to Amanda's video, and her question was, did you or did you not eat something whilst reading this book? And I wasn't 100% sure because it wasn't something I consciously kept track of. But since it took me nearly 2 weeks to finish this book, I think statistically there's a bigger chance that I probably did eat something whilst reading this book at some point. So then the next video I came to was of Cheyenne, and her prompt was to read a book that you think will be 5 stars. I ended up picking Frenchman's Creek by Daphne DuMaurier, which I just started yesterday. I really love her writing style. Her books are often very atmospheric and dark and broody, It's set on the coast of Cornwall as a pirate, I think, and I'm hoping I will really love this. I have finished Frenchman's Creek by Daphne DuMaurier, and it was exactly what I hoped it would be. In this book we have the lady Dona St. Column, and she's a noblewoman. She's living in 17th century England. She spends her day with other noblemen and women at the court in London, and she is absolutely tired of her life. She finds her life, and especially her marriage, boring and unfulfilling, and she decides to leave it all behind and move into their country house on the Cornish coast. Just to get some peace and quiet. But she soon finds out that peace and quiet are not what's in store for her at this coast, because when she takes a walk on the grounds, she finds a pirate ship has settled in a hidden creek, and well, she basically falls in love with the captain of the ship, the Frenchman in the title of the book, who is the opposite of what she has known in her life so far, and everything she's ever dreamed of and more. And what happens in this book is just a very fun, scandalous, passionate kind of adventure, and I was 100% here for it. Look, I can sum up a dozen flaws with this book. I think it romanticizes cheating on a husband who, you know, might be a bit pompous, but who is also caring and considerate, with someone who is more dangerous and exciting. I think the main character is kind of entitled and insufferable. She only cares for herself and puts herself in front of anybody else, especially also in front of her children. The pirate in question seems perfect in every way and always seems to know exactly what she wants all the time before even she knows it herself. So yeah, I saw a lot of flaws in this book, and I saw a lot of flaws in this love triangle. But the thing is, I read this book, I noticed the flaws, and I still absolutely adored it. I thought the prose was stunning. I thought the dialogue was really quick and witty. I loved DuMaurier's observations of character, and it was just a good old-fashioned romp of a story. Nothing more, nothing less, and I think it just does what it says out to do perfectly. So yeah, I had a really good time with this book. The question that Cheyenne had for my next step in this choose your own adventure path was, did you give this book 5 stars or 4 stars or lower? Now I gave this book 4.5 stars. So not 5 stars, but also not 4 stars or lower. And I think I could argue picking either of them. I ended up going with the 5-star path because even though this book wasn't perfect and I could see its flaws, I felt like my reading experience of this was a 5-star experience. So that's what I went for. I could have gone the other path and have good reasoning for that as well, but I went for this path. Which took me to Amy of A Star Reads, and her prompt was to read a book with that fits the season that you are currently in. We are in winter here right now, and we are also finally having some proper winter weather. There's no snow, but we have some very cold, freezing, bright, crispy days, and yeah, I'm really here for it. The book I picked was The True Deceiver by Tove Jansson. As you can see, it has a very snowy scene on the cover, and it mentions on the back as well that it's set during a time where the sun rises late and is early to set. I don't really know what this book is about, but I have read and loved other works of this author, and yeah, I have high hopes about this one. Alright, let's wrap up this thing, and also Happy New Year. I did let this run into 2026 a little bit, and I think this would have bothered me in the past if I couldn't wrap something up neatly in a month, or especially not a year, but I'm fine with it now, so I don't know, I'm happy with that. So let's first talk about The True Deceiver by Tove Jansson. She's a Finnish author, probably most famous for her work with on the Moomins. She writes in Swedish, and this book is translated by Thomas Thiel, and it was first published in 1982. So this book is set in a small Finnish village during the middle of the winter, and it basically follows two main characters. On the one hand, we have Katri. She's a young woman, and she's basically an outcast in this village. The other villages are equally intrigued as scared by her. She's described as being very tall, with yellow eyes. She always wears this big fur coat. She has a big dog that never leaves her side, and she just kind of keeps herself to herself, and she takes care of her brother. And then we also have Anna. She's an elderly woman who is very well loved in this village and very well respected. She's a children's book illustrator. She's very famous of this children's book series with bunny rabbits, where she takes really close-ups of like the forest floor. They sound absolutely beautiful. Now Anna has something that Katri wants, but Katri also believes that she can give something to Anna that she could use. So even though they seem like very opposite kind of people, they do get involved with each other in this book, and I think that's all I'll say about the plot. I think Tove Jansson is not a writer you would read for plot. What she does best is very simple prose, or not simple, but very sparse and very subtle prose. She has this kind of writing style where maybe at first it kind of seems simple and straightforward until you know, something starts to click, and you can see that she evokes a lot with only a few words. She writes characters that seem very real, and throughout the book you're never quite sure what to think of them. None of them are immediately likable. You never truly know what their motives are. You might think you know them, but then they'll do something to surprise you. So it has also an undertone of being a little dark and a little unsettling, but you can't quite put your finger on it. And it's all very subtle and a little bit cold, and maybe even a little bit too subtle. Like, I don't think it's a book that I would immediately recommend, but I do think it's a book I would want to read again, because I think it's a book that would improve if you got really familiar with it. It's a book that kind of raises more questions than giving answers, and that's why it's something you could return to. So yeah, for me it wasn't a love at first sight kind of book, but I think it's something I could grow to love over time. Now, I don't know whether I will give it more effort and time, but I'll keep it close for now at least. So then the question that Amy had was, do you prefer the fall or winter season or the spring or summer season? And I like both seasons. I think both have their good things and bad things. But I ended up choosing fall and winter just because I prefer being cold over being hot. And that got me back to Bailey, and her prompt, and also the final prompt, was to read the most popular sequel, which she specified as the book with the most number of ratings rather than the highest ratings. Now hear me out, because I did some book girl math with this. When it was time for this book, there was only a few days left in the new year, and I didn't think I could finish an entire book before the end of the year. So the last book for this project was also going to be my first book for 2026, and I also always want to start my year with a reread. I'm doing a whole readathon about rereads in January. There is still time to join if you want to. So instead of picking the most popular books from my TBR, I wanted to look at the books I've already read, but I didn't want to pick like the most read book from the books I've read, because that would probably mean I'd be reading Harry Potter, and I didn't want to read that right now. So I ended up going with I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, because it's one of the books I really wanted to read in January. I got it out from the library, and from the like 3 or 4 books I got from the library to potentially reread, this was the one with the most ratings, and also it does have more readers on the story graph than any other book on my TBR. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou is an autobiography, and as I'm saying, I realize it is actually part of a series. It's the first part of her autobiography, and I think there are 6 or 7 in total. So yeah, this video is going to be more on topic than I thought it would be. This is about Maya Angelou's childhood. The book starts when she and her older brother, who coincidentally is also called Bailey, were put on the train by their mother to go live with their grandmother. So they traveled from, I think, California to Arkansas together, aged 3 and 4, with like wrist tags with information who they were and where they were headed. So like already in the first sentence of this book, you know it's not going to be an ordinary tale. It's pretty straightforward in its structure. She goes through her childhood in chronological order, talking about the most formative things that happened, and like memories in her life. She grows up in the segregated American South, with all the hardships that comes with. She grapples with her loyalty to her mother, who she really loves and admires, but was not really able to be a mother figure in her life. There's a horrible time when she is 8 years old, when she gets raped, and after that she goes mute for a few years. She struggles with her self-worth, finding herself ugly and worthless. But even with all that, I wouldn't say this is a tragic book. Obviously tragic things happen, but it is also a story of growth and a story of healing. There's the strength of her bond with some of her family members, where she finds support, and also the Black community as a whole. And you can also see the emergence of her love for language and poetry, and I think in that way it's a great start to of this autobiographical series, because you can see kind of the seeds planted for the person that she's going to become. Of course, the writing is absolutely stunning. It's very lyrical and poetic. Maya Angelou is a poet, and that comes through in the writing. This is also what I would call a book for the senses. It's a book with sights, smells, sounds, touch. I checked and I read this book before in 2007, so nearly 20 years ago, and I couldn't really remember any of the big plot points, but there were some moments in the book that I could remember reading, and those were usually the parts that were very heavy on the sensory writing. And I really love when a book can do that. I think that's a testament to its quality, when you can read something 20 years ago and it just like stores in your brain somewhere. So yeah, that was I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. And with that, I got to the end of the Choose Your Own Adventure. I thought it was so much fun to do this readathon, even though I didn't actually join in at the time when everyone else is doing. I was glad that I could make my own books fit the prompts, and then actually ended up reading 2 books in the series as well. So that was kind of surprising. Anyway, thank you so much, Bailey, for setting all this up. I really loved it. Of course, I'll link all the people I encountered on the way down below, because they are also all awesome people. So yeah, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching. I realize this is probably gonna come out amidst all those like best of 2025 videos, so I might get a little lost in there. So an especially big thank you if you choose to watch this video, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.